Hello, and welcome back to the Gotti Video Podcast. This is a space where we host conversations with different designers, architects, and industry thought leaders to help educate you and your work. My name is Joe Gotti, and I'm COO and Director of Design here at Gotti Furniture. For today's episode of the podcast, we have the opportunity to talk to two guests. First, Tiffany Nash, owner and principal of Product Architecture and Design. Tiffany is a licensed architect with over 20 years of experience in the industry with an expertise in library design. Second, we also have Dan Pohrte, fellow owner and principal of Product Architecture, who is a registered lead accredited professional with over 15 years of experience in the industry. Tiffany and Dan, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you guys here today. How's it going with you guys?
Good. Busy.
Good. It's always good to be busy.
Yeah, we're not complaining.
So typically we want to start off and just kind of get backgrounds on you guys. Just, want to talk about how you've gotten here today. So Dan, we'll start with you. What's been your journey to get you here today?
I did my bachelor's of architecture down at University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign.
Oh, okay.
And then after that, I went to and got my master's actually to a school called SIRC, which is an architecture-only school out in Los Angeles. I spent about 5 years in Los Angeles then working for different firms out there. And then came back to the Midwest and worked at Ross Barney Architects, which is actually where Tiffany and I met. And after that, it's kind of been at Product Architecture and Design since then.
Oh, nice. Tiffany, kind of same question to you. How have you gotten here today?
I grew up in Noblesville, Indiana, which is just north of Indianapolis. And I went to school also at University of Illinois. And then during school, I'd go back and work at a firm in Indianapolis and worked on projects that are similar to Chuck E. Cheese's. They're called celebration stations, which was kind of fun, but sort of a different kind of work. And I did that for 5 years all through college and all my breaks. And then for grad school, I went to University of Michigan. And then I ended up in Chicago, and I worked for a firm called Lucien Lagrange. That was, he does a lot of French-inspired kind of work, a lot of condo buildings. I worked there for 3 years, met my husband, and then left. and then and then I went to Lohan Architects, and I worked on some public work that I really liked. And worked there for 3 years. And I kind of wanted to work at a place that I wanted to work for a woman. So I ended up at Ross Barney with Dan, and that's where we met. And then we worked there for 6 years and decided we wanted to make a go of it.
Yeah. So how did you guys, I guess two questions here. How did you guys what made you decide that, hey, we're going to go into business together? Because I work in a family business and that's always fun and unique. And then two, how, you guys do a lot of libraries, what led you to that as well?
We worked on projects at Ross Barney together. One of the major projects was Champaign Public Library. And then we worked on a science building in Duluth. Those were kind of the two major ones that we worked on together. We had a good working relationship. I think we always say we have 50% the same, and the other 50% kind of fills each other's gaps. And I was pregnant with my second kid. Yeah. And I just was sort of done. I think I just wanted to call my own hours, and I was ready to just try something. And I can't say why you were as ready to try, but
no, it was really fun because the firms that I had worked in before, people had a tendency to kind of break off from. They were sort of these higher design international firms, and either you stay there for 2 years or you stay there for 20. There wasn't a lot of people in between. And when Tiffany and I started working together at Ross Barney, we worked on a lot of different projects. So they started cycling projects through us kind of as a team with a couple of other people. And then we started realizing that there was this, level of information that we were responsible for, and it started being all of it. So not arrogantly, but we kind of liked having it be flat, where the project team knew what was happening from the day to day on a project. There wasn't somebody up here and somebody below, and then all these people trying to translate in the middle. So we did kind of start our firm with that kind of idea in mind, albeit smaller projects. But we've always tried to stay in all the meetings, keep everybody involved so that we don't have this kind of weird, wait, what is this room for? Or, I didn't know we had this wing of the building, or I had no idea there was a roof on top of a roof. There's just things that we kind of figured out under Carol's umbrella how to do well and how not to do them well at sometimes. And I think that helped us kind of grow together as a professional team, and then bring that into our firm now. So it was a really great place to work. And I think we owe Carol a lot for sure. But at the same time, I think she and I were able to kind of grow how we wanted to work together before we had to jump into the pool entirely.
Yeah, well, that's good.
And we were young enough that we could always go find another job if it didn't work.
Well,
So
that was Tiffany's pragmatism, because we're like, I think the market crashed the day we opened our firm. And I was like, oh my God, I just borrowed some money from my grandmother. What's going to happen? And she's like, we can always go get jobs. Don't worry about it. And I was like, all right. It was very funny. I remember that day well.
Good. So, and most of your guys' work is in like the public library space, correct?
Yeah.
How did you guys kind of come to decide on that niche? Was it that intentional or fall into, or a little bit of both?
So we started, as Tiffany said, the last project we did at Carol's was the Champaign Public Library. And I think during that, we made some really beautiful relationships. And I'll let Tiffany talk about that a little bit. The flip end of that is, at the same time, we're growing our kind of library work within the office. We just enjoy doing it because it's really nice designed public spaces, which we think is important. But we were also working on restaurants and sort of different project types. And it was really hard. There was always loss of clients, loss of money, loss of work, loss of projects. It just wasn't as enjoyable. And then at the end of it, some of the restaurants were nice, seeing people enjoy them, but a lot of it was developer work, and you don't ever understand the end client and sort of have that input of the client while we're working. And I think that lets our work be specific, is that we're always designing with somebody. It's not just this empty volume of work. And I think that's really why we focus on the libraries today. It's really an exciting project type because it encapsulates all these different types of programs. It's, meeting spaces, public spaces, office spaces, outdoor spaces. It's kind of every project type in one. And I tell myself that to make sure I stay involved. So.
Yeah, and it was really through some of those connections we made. I mean, we had a connection with you guys from our University of Florida project. We had, a lot of connections through furniture manufacturers and dealers from some of those projects. And our work started with pretty small projects like simple layouts and then directors all talked to each other, and it became word of mouth from there. And it's just grown from small, furniture selection to small interior renovations, and now to new buildings. So it's just.
Oh, wow. Exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we've obviously worked together for a long time. I didn't fully know the whole journey. It's very interesting. Well, and also in preparation for this, so we were doing some snooping on you guys. So I didn't know that both of you actually studied abroad for your guys' masters. So yeah. Dan, you were in Switzerland, and Tiffany, you were in France?
Yep.
For that, where in France?
We were in Versailles. We were actually in the horse stables, the old horse stables. They set up architecture studios there.
Nice. So what kind of drove you to go there, and kind of like how's that influenced kind of your experiences today?
Well, the reason I went there was half of our program went over there. They just kind of moved half of us there. And so it was an opportunity I didn't want to pass up. So I did that. That was for the whole school year. And it was on my 21st birthday. It was the day we left. Girl from Indiana going to college in Champaign. So moving to Versailles was quite an eye-opener. And I had never been to Europe before. When I were just talking about this, like I had never been to the East Coast. So, I had been to Chicago many times. So that's sort of my historical perspective of the world was, we studied it, but seeing in person is a whole different thing. So I would say, that was a long time ago, but my first impression and what affected me the most at the time was how long things had been there and what had happened to people and to buildings over the years. and that they could withstand all of the wars, all of the change of use, all of the people coming through, just kind of what had happened over that many years. I had never seen anything like that. And it is different seeing it in person than seeing it in the books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was in the south of France, actually, or I'm sorry, the south of Switzerland.
Oh, okay.
In a place called Lake Como. So it's like Bicarmo and Ticino. And it's a really super kind of highbrow Italian modernists that kind of practice down in that area.
Sure.
They're really beautiful buildings, Scalfini. And the professor that was going over there, I was at SARC at the time, was a huge Corbusier fan, who I was always very into Corbusier. It's always like me, circle, funny living in Chicago. And he was doing a tour to go see all of Corb's buildings in Europe. So I was like, I called my grandmother up. She's always financing my trips. And so I was the same Midwestern kid and, hoping to get to Europe. And I went there with the idea of seeing Corb's buildings and, slightly arrogant, I know what Europe's like. And then when you get there and you're just blown away by the culture and the exchange of cultures and seeing people of types and different and proximities, it's really a lot closer than I had any idea. So I went there with an idea about architecture and obviously left with some great experiences towards that. But I think public and community space, especially, it had a huge impact on me. And I think it speaks to what Tiffany was saying, where the towns are sort of based on these open areas. And it's not really the way towns are laid out in terms of urban planning. And then they kind of filter out from there. So being able to experience these incredibly old towns, or going to Milan and seeing a newer town, or going to, to Venice, and sort of flip-flopping between these sort of modern and sort of historic areas that are really right up next to each other. And these architects that kind of play in between those two are really beautiful. So that experience was hugely impactful on me, both in the bigger idea scale of like planning, and then sort of the smaller idea scale of sort of the public person political space, which I think is really nice. I think we kind of skipped over that in undergrad at University of Illinois or in Champaign. There wasn't a lot of talk about that kind of culture of space. Yeah. And honestly, I think Tiffany and I try to bring that to our work a lot. And I'm not trying to weave it together, but I think if you can keep your work and have really the people involved in it, sort of specific to the solutions that you derive, I think that makes for better work. And I think we've actually both agree with that. We want people who use the space to be part of the design of the space.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's interesting because, when we were, again, prepping for this interview, you guys talk about on your website, there's like no cookie cutter kind of solution to, kind of design problem solving. So do you feel like those kind of like the experiences you're talking about, that kind of feeds into kind of what, led you to that kind of thinking?
The cookie cutter kind of thinking, it would be in exactly what we do, that we do the same project type over and over and over. And that this is our, we've grown to be, I don't know if you would call us experts, but this is what we know, and this is what we do. Sure. And we don't want to solve problems in the same way for every project. And that would be very easy to do. It would be more profitable to do. But there would be no excitement in that. I would also say, some things go back to the durability issue that we brought up with European buildings. I would say there's a somewhat limited amount of things that you can use in libraries, because it has to withstand all the heavy abuse and time. And you could so easily just use the same fabric over and over. You could use the same pieces of furniture over and over. We could use the same carpet over and over, and not take a risk of trying something new, because that's the safe thing to do. And again, probably more profitable, but it would be boring. And so we do that for ourselves. We do that for them. Every community is not the same. We engage a lot with our clients and make sure that we're doing things that fit the community and what they want. And we depend on them to tell us that. So everything is very collaborative with our clients. And we take care to not use the same thing, even like our bathrooms. We don't want anyone's bathrooms to look the same. We use different tile in everyone's bathroom. We try to use different carpet on every project. We try to use different signature light fixtures in every project. You can see similarities because it is the same designers, but we really want to make sure that everything is different and that everybody is happy with their building for their town.
And I think that creates identity. And I think a lot of times, I think libraries have, and I'm not going to say in the last couple of years, but maybe the last 5 years, have really returned back around to branding. I think they see themselves as more retail, which obviously they have always been, but I think it's a better model than storage. They're not storage, and that's way gone as an idea. But they're rebranding themselves out of that storage model, even though they've not considered themselves that way for a long time. I think, again, graphic design is coming back. The idea of design is coming back into libraries and how they present themselves. And I think when we work on the spaces, we're making sure that we're using or creating spaces that can be identifiable as places in those towns also. So, we just finished a project in Prospect Heights and has this beautiful outdoor space with a fireplace. And when we were interviewing, the board president said, we need a space where people come in and go, whoa, or wow, I want to come back to that. And I remember when I was a kid, I used to go to that space and that space was there. So people don't always know what they want, but they kind of know what they want it to feel like, or they want it to identify as. So I think that's one of our goals, is always to find that identification and make sure that we're kind of branding with the library. And it's not just about signage. I think, hopefully I'm making my point right, that it's more about leading to ideas and sort of bigger goals that create signage, that create that sort of wow moment. And I think that really sort of supports what Tiffany's talking about in terms of that cookie cutter idea too, is if we keep doing the same thing, then this idea of branding is sort of moot. So keep creating spaces or libraries that people can identify as singular, then that sort of branding becomes holistic. And I think that's been really evident in some of our projects for sure. I mean, we can send us the paint color, send us into the building. And so we're going to use that as part of our, our logo now. And that's a direct one-to-one, but there's other things happening that are a little bit more subtle than that maybe they're not always aware of, but I think creates this really singular idea of how the library presents itself publicly, for sure.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think, with that, how are you guys, what you're talking about, understanding community identity and, getting community engagement. I mean, that's a really common thread that we hear with people that are working on library spaces, that they're not cookie cutter. Every community is unique in its own way. So how do you guys go about getting that in community engagement, understanding that community identity, and then working that back out into, kind of a product for them?
A lot of it comes from the library board and the library director. The library board, they're all community members, so they are really there to give us their idea of what that means. And the library directors, while they may not always be from that town, they're engaging with everyone who comes to the library. So they're getting a lot of feedback. We do occasionally do community engagement. Most of the time, honestly, it occurs when we have some level of design to show them.
Sure.
So we really are getting that initial idea of what it means to live in that community from the board and from library staff.
We're going back to what you were saying, Tiffany. You were so you're talking about, so you'll engage with the board, the director of the library, and then so it sounds like you get things to certain level with certain amount of visuals or something that then at that point you'll engage with maybe a broader set of the community.
Yeah.
At that point.
Yeah, and then even at the beginning of projects where communities don't have, let's say, this is going to go to a trends discussion at some point, but they don't have all the things that are the current trends in libraries. Yeah. But they also don't know that they can have those because they don't know that could exist in a library. There's a lot of libraries out there that still, it's kind of a warehouse of books with a few places to sit. So they just don't know that they can have it. So a lot of times we'll figure out a way to show those things, whether it's a plan in their existing building or images of similar spaces we've done, to let them know that can exist in their own library. That's the way we sort of need to do it.
That's what I was going to get at. Was the visual, getting them to visualize, I think is really a big idea. And sometimes you talk about it as an old pair of shoes that you don't realize your shoes are old until you get new shoes, because you're like, whoa, I should have gotten rid of those a while back.
Yeah.
And it is hard to break people out of their trends sometimes. So that level of information that Tiffany's talking about is really important. And the second thing is a lot of our work, I would say 80% of our work is renovations. We do probably a new building a year or every 2 years, but in the renovation, you always have to find sort of that those moments within the existing building that are really successful. And that goes back to that cookie cutter idea too, is that you need to really, and I think it makes, typically on the board, there's going to be someone there or a couple of members there that have been there since the last renovation or since the building was built. And sometimes the idea of scratching everything or getting rid of everything or talking about everything poorly really comes across bad, and it's kind of a bad optic. But it's even bad enough because I think we'll get to this a little bit later too, is that if we can find ways to keep things that are really good and strong, we can spend dollars on other things to make them as strong. So instead of spreading budgets out across the building, we're really trying to find a really good system that works great. It's almost like the Lockheed Martin model where you keep 20% of something and spend your money on the other 80%. That gives you a lot of bang. So instead of reinventing all the wheels, we really try to work hard with our library clients to make sure that we're, again, building on what they have that's working really good. And it makes people feel positive about what they've done in terms of growing the library. And then it also lets us put the kind of money, the dollars for the budget where we can get, again, the most new programs or grow the library in the right direction.
Interesting.
And I'm just going to say one more thing about the community engagement. One thing that we definitely notice or know that is different from city to city is the heavy users of the library. It really does vary. One library may be next to a middle school and it gets 100 kids in at a certain time of day. One may have a heavy senior citizen use. Another may have tons of young children coming in for the interactives. And another may have working professionals using the space. So and then sometimes some libraries will have really heavy computer use and another will have zero, like everybody brings their own. So you can see that when we're going in and when we go visit, but you do need them to tell you, here's our issues, here's what we need more of, here's what we don't need at all. And that also keeps it from being cookie cutter because those problems are different in different communities.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. And I guess going from there, you kind of brought it up, Tiffany, trends. So I know I ask everybody about trends now because we're, we'll dare to say coming out of a world, maybe post-COVID or so on and so forth. But yeah, I guess I'd be curious to know, what trends are you guys kind of seeing in the overall library with architecture, space usage, kind of what the community is looking for, kind of the overarching trends that you guys are seeing emerge, maybe post-COVID world.
We were actually going over this a little bit before, so we'll make sure that we're not hitting the same things. A couple of things that I've seen or we've been working with clients specifically on is a lot of integration of outdoor space into the overall program in the library. And that's been super exciting. As architects, we're always trying to reach out of the building and work on the landscape and approach the building and plaza and interaction, not just passive interaction, but a more sort of programmable space that's versatile. And so that's been a huge change in what we've done. It started from sort of reworking plazas to now lots of outdoor seating, lots of ideas of durability and again, children's programs, adult programs, outdoor space, covered outdoor space, kind of covered outdoor space. It really has just been a tremendous change and it's one of the positives that did come out of COVID because libraries obviously couldn't have people inside of the building. So they were doing programs in green spaces, either outdoors, their own building or within the community. And so it gave them a beautiful face of being, more than just a building itself, people that are inside of it. And then B, it just the engagement, especially in the Midwest, you're only, we have 8 decent months of being outside. So having it's positive Dan came to the meeting today. It's it
all depends on your tolerance. I mean, I wear flip-flops up until there's the first snowfall. So
what size jacket you have on. And then second, I'll hit my two and then Tiffany can take over, is really this integration of the speed of delivery. So book drive ups, holds, outdoor lockers, it's just this self-checks. And I know those are all kind of obvious, but a lot of the buildings were designed in a way that it's really hard to get a car up to them, or it's really hard to get people in without getting them deeply into the building. For better or worse, a lot of the libraries in the 90s were planned with the meeting rooms and toilets right up front, and you're blocked by everything. So it's really hard to get people beyond that first collar. Mm-hmm. So I think that change of the library model to be, if patrons want to come in quickly and patrons want to come in and get a book really quick and kind of leave, they can. Or if they want to integrate more into the full collection or with staff, they can do that also. So I think that the speed model is really interesting to us. You know, when you come in a car, or you come on foot, or you come, how you kind of experience the library, and when you see the identity of it, the size of the branding and the size of the sort of idea is, I think that's been a real shift that we've been really excited about for sure out in the design of the spaces.
And then some other trends are trends that existed before COVID. So I think there are some things that have not changed. The makerspace is still quite a big trend that we're seeing. It does mean something different for every library, but they all do have similar features, just bringing in different types of equipment, instructional space and storage. Study rooms can never have too many study rooms, so we're constantly trying to, at different sizes. Teen spaces, I mentioned before, you know, if a library is near school, every library is trying to carve out a teen space, and that can mean anywhere. There could be a separate middle school space or a separate high school space, or it could be one and the same. And it's always kind of a hangout space that's a little bit separate from the books. That's typically what we've been seeing. And just let them be kids, let them be loud. And then lots of furniture solutions, things that are like your nooks. Those are huge. Finding a way to get some privacy without having to build a room and having a flexible floor plan, so that things can change, which goes back to your question, so that things can last a long time and change as they need to. Those sort of solutions we're trying to incorporate as much as possible.
Totally right. And I think our firm is structured in a way, and I'm getting slightly off topic here, but it's structured in a way that we don't have architects and interior designers and lighting, and we do it all on a project team. And Tiffany and I are involved in all the project teams, and it's not to be overhanded, it's heavy-handed. It's more to make sure there's a consistency. So we're at the meetings. But what that gives us is that ability to look at a room, furniture, and the planning all the same. So, you know, we don't hand it off and then populate the space. We really look at it all at once, and we'll give multiple options of, do you want this to have walls? Do you want it to be open? Do you want it to be kind of open? And sort of have that versatility. I think in the design, or as you're designing, let's make that that decision, that sort of informed decision that says, in 10 years, this might be a little bit different. So maybe we should keep the space a little bit loose, or, you know, let's put the CD collection over here, knowing that we're going to need more room for the maker in 5 years, and we can build that way, but we can get rid of that collection. So I think our model's a little bit different because we are so flat that it allows us to give these types of solutions that, how do I say, like the furniture and the architecture are not separate. You know, they're looked at as one piece. And then the design is more holistic that way, for sure. Both in terms of finish and planning.
I want to mention one more trend, and it's a trend since the day we started our firm that still is going today, which is activity areas for young kids. We started this with Waukegan Public Library right when we started, and it has never stopped. It's just kind of figuring out to what degree that happens, but it's making kids cry when they have to leave the library. That's what we like to do. We're just having so much fun. So
yeah, absolutely. It's a good way to put that.
and it's funny too, because that goes back to the branding. It goes back to that whoa moment that the library boards are always looking for, and hitting it at the age of kid always kind of reminds them that the library is always there, even as they're growing up. And then I think that lends back towards that teen example that Tiffany was giving, where that used to be the age group that was kind of gapped, that it was really hard to get them to come to the spaces. And I think just how our communities are based now and what the kids are doing after school, it's a good place to be from 3 to 6. And it's wild. In some of our libraries, there's 150 people there that aren't there throughout the day from 3 to 6.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so planning for that is kind of fun, for sure.
Interesting. Have you guys noticed? We've been seeing more requests, and I think more kind of leaning towards like thinking of the libraries. You said think about branding identity, but also too, like I've seen people thinking more about like how a retail space is set up, and that there's been we've seen a big boom for like display shelving. So people like, we're starting to I think people are starting to catch on like, hey, stacking books really densely deep on a shelf is not a really great way to move product. You put it on display, stuff moves. Have you guys noticed that from kind of like working with different communities, that like they're kind of going in that more of a direction, thinking about their collections and how they're going to kind of move and circulate collections?
Definitely. We always do some sort of face out shelving when you walk in the building, making sure that you see people and books when you walk in. That's been sort of all of our projects. And some to an extent where we'll even pull popular nonfiction sections out, which is sort of a newer thing. We did it at Elmhurst quite a bit. That's probably our best example of that. Pulling the and that could be whatever that means to that community, but travel it was big there, although that's even changing. The print material for that's changing quite a bit. But definitely pulling things that are going to move quickly off the shelves. The other thing is library of things, which is quite popular right now, and figuring out different ways to display that. Everybody has sort of different ideas and
that's a hard one.
do different things, but that does fly off the shelf to the point where some libraries don't even want to just display it because it'll look like empty shelves. So
that's the hard part. No, it's all gone. So it looks like it's been.
It just means they need more library of things.
No, it's funny, and it's changing that way. It's funny too because again, a lot of our work is interior renovation, and circling back to people are looking for new programs, right? So they want a maker space, they want more study rooms, but if we're not expanding the footprint, then we have to figure out a way to fit those new spaces within the existing envelope of the building. So one of the issues, or what we always do, is kind of look at weeding the collection or removing of some of the materials, and it's always this sort of line of, if things have circulated or not circulated. And it's really hard because Tiffany and I love books just outside of what we do. And obviously most librarians love books also, but it's the first couple steps are really hard. But after that, and after the project's usually complete, they figure out that the materials actually circ better. Part of that is Tiffany's genius, how she organizes their collections and then gets it displayed in the right way. I think that's a big difference, but some of it is because the collection's more approachable. It's not those dense shelf books like you were talking about in your earlier, as the example leading to this question. It just, and things tend to circ more, which is actually what they're hoping for. So it's a really funny kind of consequence, one of the other. And then especially it's funny, like for the example of picture books in youth areas, you put them in bins, face out bins, because kids can't read. So they don't know what it says on the spine, but if you face them out and they can actually see the books as in you would in a retail store, we've seen circ go up 30%.
Yeah.
Just on those books. So they don't fit as much on the shelves, but more is out of the library. So it gives us space to put things. So I know that's a really specific example, but it really, funny because picture books bring branding and retail and shelving and planning together into one really good box. That's totally understandable because, like I said, kids can't read at that age. So they're all.
Yeah. And I think it's hard. Like, you have this saying, don't judge a book by its cover, but we're visual creatures. And there's total judgment in a book by its cover. And so the reality is like, you see the cover, it's engaging, it's how you move product. And so, it's been an interesting, we've noticed that maybe the last 6 to 9 months, it's just all of a sudden, it's like, why we're getting like tons of requests for book display. And then, when I was at ALA, it was like every kind of facilities talk or whatever I went into that was kind of related to the industry was like book display, stop using, high density, or not high density, stop, thinking about shelving as moving, circulating, like you got to get the displays. We need more interesting displays. Where do we put it kind of blew me away. I mean, I guess I hadn't been to an ALA in a couple of years due to the circumstances.
Sure.
Yeah, I was really surprised. It kind of caught me off guard a little bit, but it makes sense. I mean, it's logical to some degree.
There was one solution that we did was really done. It was just putting a red shelf at the end of every row. And then that would be face out and would just show kind of books that were within that range.
Yeah. I mean, it's like,
retail. She's like, the books just fly off there. Like people just walk past and take them. I walk past and all those shelves are empty.
Yeah. And I mean, at retail, you fight for an end cap. You get your product in an end cap.
And it was staff picks, but it was staff picks for each one, which got to be slightly more obtuse and interesting, which was great. So it's like the staff was happy because they were putting their favorite ideas up there, and then patrons there was this connection, and then staff has connections with the patrons. It's this whole really interesting idea. And I think building on that, like you're saying, I think, and those levels of display too, like what do you put in the front door? What do you put, by the cafe? What do you put? It's a really good, magazines have always been like that, but it's switching now more towards the print material also.
And then I'll say too, libraries are starting to judge their success on head count. More where it used to always be circulation count.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of people downloading their books from the library, but coming in to use it for other reasons. So the programming that the libraries do and us making space for them to do that is bringing a lot more people in. And if they can catch the face of the book while they're coming through, that's great. But they really want to make sure that they get everybody in.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
So, I mean, as we're kind of talking about trends too, I guess I'm maybe curious to know from you guys, like what, you're seeing these kind of trends, whether they've been there for a while or emerging, like, I guess from not necessarily from a furniture perspective, maybe some of it, but from other perspective, like what are gaps that you're seeing that, hey, I'm seeing people ask for this, or we're just not able to, achieve or do either from an architecture or facility standpoint?
Well, you and I have talked about some of this stuff before, but
okay, put me on the spot.
Sometimes it's not what's missing, but it's what there's not enough of, because again, don't want to do the same thing over and over again. I still think there's a gap in durable children's seating.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we do use the same things a lot because we've just had durability issues with some things. And so anything plastic is great. I know we'd like to see more of that.
Yeah. I also think, I know this is kind of specific too, but in terms of maker spaces and other spaces, there's this need for like the cart or the table that can move and be adjustable. And I know there are some really strong examples of that, but there is a need for like a versatile table storage piece that can make its way around the library. I think we see these really funny or really distinct differences in maker spaces, especially where some people want just a room with carts in it with equipment on it they can actually take anywhere. And some want more of a built-in idea and the tables are more adjustable. Or in a collaborative space or a team space, we want a table that has storage but can move. And there are some examples of that, but I think that's going to be something that I think is going to take on maybe more power in that, a little more jack of all trades, sort of idea that, and again, it always circles back to what Tiffany's talking about, because most of these things are available, but they break within 3 months because they haven't had the R&D like you guys put into your work. It's not something you can make in a year. So we'll have, libraries come to us and say, we found this table, it's amazing. And we're like, 10,000 people are going to use that next year. You can't buy that because it's not, you could buy 20 of them and then we can just keep replacing them. That's okay. Yeah. But I think it is that, getting that versatile, movable, partable piece that is also durable. It's easy to make a chair that's solid, that not easy. I shouldn't say that. Sorry, that's rude. It's easier to be successful making a chair that doesn't come apart or move than it is to make a piece that constantly has doors and everything that slides open and moves throughout the day and has that same level of durability. I think that's one thing too that I would like to see.
Yeah. I mean, the more complex or the more moving parts you have on something, the bigger the risk kind of umbrella
you can
goes.
design yourself into a corner by being too specific, but I think there is that just need for that thing that can make its way around and be usable in different programs, with different ideas of use within the same space, for sure.
Interesting.
Like, I think that your ability to customize your pieces makes a big difference that you can't do with other things. So we do get, we'll have bizarre table sizes that we need, or I don't know, or shapes, or and everybody doesn't offer that. So sometimes that's difficult to find exactly what you need.
With the same durability. Yeah. I mean, we can usually get someone to make it, but you're like, this doesn't have the background of knowing what things can go wrong in the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I want to shift gears on you guys for a second and put you on the spot a little bit. I guess I want to just talk a little bit about, like, maybe a project or a segment of project that you guys are either favorite or most proud of, kind of in your past history of working together.
Oh, you want us to actually name one?
I want you to name names.
All of them. Everyone.
This is always the most awkward part of the interview.
All of the children.
Like, I can't pick my favorite.
Well, my son's my favorite. My daughter. That's hard. There's lots of. Yeah, go ahead.
I can name one. We do get asked this sometimes in interviews, and as one of my favorites, I named Waukegan Public Library because it was our first, and we kind of worked on it for a while. It was our first sort of major project with a real thought process behind who was using it and why, and then and the library had specific goals. We did their early learning center. That was our first project there, and the library was one of the major things they wanted to do was make sure everybody knows English. So we had everything in 2 languages. We had different ways of learning, hands-on, listening, looking at things, acting things out, lots of pretend play. We made a space that was flexible enough for them to change the theme of every year, which they did, and it was completely transformed. Just super proud of the fact that we could make something that looked great on its own and then looked so great once they changed it up. And then after that, we sort of built on those ideas for adults, and we did helped with an ESL area. So that has been one of my favorites. There are others for different reasons, but I'll just name that one.
And for there's always different reasons for different projects. Like the outdoor space at Prospect Heights is extremely successful. Indian Trails, I think, always has it's one of our first larger projects. It was a 15,000 square foot addition in the front of the building, and the building used to look like 2 halves. So there was one built in the 90s and one built in the 70s, and they had nothing to do with one another. So an architect just kind of put another building next to their existing building, and the board didn't like the idea that there wasn't a unified kind of presence of the building or the way the library was actually laid out. You could feel yourself going from halves as you were even inside of the spaces. So part of that solution was we were asked to make a singular library that had a public-facing face that was understandable as a library as people went by on a busy road that was out front. And I think the addition solves all of those problems. And I think we're always really proud of ideas like that get executed with our clients. The designs we always try to keep them high, and I think that's really part of our success. But I think finding the core of the problem and then solving that problem and getting it through in the architecture or the planning or the solution of the space, that's actually where I think both of us, I hope, but where I find the most pleasure. Like when I walk and see kids playing in the youth area and they're monkeying around with the hands-on experience, it's the best. That's really the best thing. So is it the coolest design we've ever done? Maybe not, but is it always the most successful? Absolutely. And I'm not trying to dodge the question. I actually is, we're architects, so we love beautiful things, but sometimes the beauty is in the simplicity of the function of it and getting that solution exactly right. I think always, and keeping that level of creativity really high. I'm always really proud of our office that we always come in with 1 or 2 or 3 ideas of how to solve a problem. And we say this in interviews, so it makes it sound shitty, but we never end up with that one solution. It's always a combination of A, B, and then part of C, and D makes sense, but it's too expensive, but we like what it does to the back door. So I think fleshing those ideas out as a process is really, I think, where I find the most satisfaction out of.
Yeah. And I think, when you're talking about specific projects, Indian Trails is one example where I don't think either one of us would look back on that project and change anything.
No. There's just one
did
detail.
everything. Yeah, we did everything that we wanted to and everything they wanted to, and there was a good budget for it, so it was highly successful in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and just finishing up Brookfield too, they had worked for 10 years to try to find a library.
Yeah,
and we worked as trying to figure out an addition for their existing building, and so as your first. So Tiffany and I built a bunch of buildings before we started our own firm, but you obviously have to grow up your firm in order to be able to do a building. So that was our first ground up building. And we had to go to our client and tell them that the solution to add anything to their existing building was wrong. And it wasn't going to work. And they had a plot of land across the street. So we did a design for the building. And we're actually working on the budget. And I think it's 11% more to have a brand new building that you want instead of this horrific Frankenstein that we're trying to figure out that never works as a solution. So we sat in the office for 3 days before the design meeting. We're like, are we doing the right thing? Are we doing the right thing here? Because we could have shot ourselves in the foot and they could have asked us to leave. But at the end, we kind of, again, through options and just information, we illustrated that they were never going to be happy with that thing that we were trying to make with them. And we were doing a good job, right? But it was an impossible task. So, getting the new building there was amazing. Again, just being able to do kind of all these ideas that you want the client and have Kim say, I want this. And you're like, okay, I want this. Okay.
It was a great project.
Yeah. How about this? Okay. It was great.
They were really nice to work with. That was just a pleasurable job.
And we think the building's beautiful. Yeah. It turned out good.
Yeah. And then, I don't know, Chicago, I'm just going to say one more. Chicago Ridge is sort of a more recent one that we've done, that they did not have a big budget, but the transformation that we made on a smaller budget, I think is one of our better examples.
Agreed. Yeah. It was a gray box. Yeah. You couldn't discern youth from adult from the lobby, from the meeting room. And it's really different now. It's great. It's a beautiful space.
See, look at all those great examples. It wasn't that hard.
Yeah.
It's 60 other ones.
Yeah, we could look through our list and tell you why we like them all.
Well, similar vein. So, what are you guys working on now that you can kind of share?
So we're working on planning for a new building. We're going to not tell you where it's at, but it's a really beautiful idea about how to put the library back into a municipal campus and how to design then the campus for all of the buildings on that campus to be successful. And again, it's that real reach toward outdoor space that I think is changing the way people look at not only the library, but how communities act in public space, which is just yay, that's fantastic, right? That's always really good. We're finishing up a renovation in Racine. They worked really hard for a lot of years to try to get that to work. I don't know if you've ever been in the Racine Library, but when you walk in the lower level lobby, you have no idea where to go ever. The stair is actually behind you, behind concrete walls through a door that's about this big. So you'd never know there's a second story to the building, which actually looks over the lake. It's actually really elegant.
Like Shed Aquarium.
Yeah. And so we put a new stair in, and it's going to change the way the library works entirely.
Wow, exciting.
That's really kind of beautiful. What else?
We're in the design stages of the nonfiction floor of Schaumburg Public Library, so a completely different scale than a lot of others. It's just huge. So that's a fun project to work on. It's big open space, staff spaces.
We're
doing all the staff areas at ELA Library in Lake Zurich. So not public spaces at all, but that's. I think when you talked about trends, I do think there are quite a few trends and trying to make sure the staff spaces are nice and staff lounges, like everything staff related. Staff, the organizations are changing quite a bit as libraries change. Okay. And people are sitting in the wrong spaces, have the wrong kinds of storage, shifting around quite a bit. So making flexible staff space, redoing staff space, making sure that they're comfortable. That's something we've been doing a lot. So that's the ELA library.
Staff were all separate before, and now they want them together, which is really nice. We're actually doing a small project too for a library in Midlothian to actually change all the public bathrooms to be, instead of really big bathrooms, to be all family individual bathrooms. And that's another trend. I know it's a smaller trend, but I think it's a really, 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 really important one. Yeah. And I think it releases the public from sim anxieties. So that's a really nice, and she had this idea like 3 years ago and then actually worked really hard to raise the dollars to get it done. Nice. So I think it's it's a project that you can kind of be proud of. It's not glamorous, but I think it's a trend in the right direction that we're seeing. Like Brookfield's all designed that way too. And I just think it's an important point that's kind of coming through for the community to look at as an example of how everyone should be treated. So I think that's really nice too.
And then, on a completely different scale, we're working on this program area at Westchester Library. And it is like you are looking at every single piece that goes in there because they want to fit a lot in a tiny space. Right. It's kind of like a maker programming play area all in one. So how do you enclose it but not enclose it? How do you have every single manipulative but still have open space for stories? How do you have storage for craft materials? I mean, it's a fun one to work on, and it's fun to focus on the little details that we don't always get to when we have a large project. Yeah. So that's kind of a fun change.
And I think the scale of our works helps us stay relevant too. You know what I mean? Because a Brookfield takes 3-4 years to get done. So I think we focus on anything ranging from furniture solutions all the way to new buildings. It keeps our staff fresh. It keeps us fresh. We're not always, we're looking for ideas that are quick. We're also looking for ideas that, can organize an entire project. So it's sort of like looking at a furniture collection and then looking at the pieces in it. You know what I mean? Like you have to look at all of them obviously together. But I think working on both those scales really helps us again, not lose sight of what's important, which is like the hand, the user at the end.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. So I want to thank you guys for your time today. It's a lot of great stuff. I learned a lot. It's surprising even after working so long together. Yeah. A lot of great examples of trends, and wasn't that hard for you guys to come up with some of your favorites, even put on the spot here. But in closing, before we kind of like sign off here, I wanted to just kind of ask you both, any words of wisdom for, from your years of experience out here that you want to kind of share with the community?
Don't ever give up on good design, no matter what your budget is. Don't settle. You can always have good design at any budget. So that's something I would say. Layouts are very, very important. And I think libraries should trust professionals to try to come up with new layouts that will work for them. So from a fresh perspective, they do trust us, but it's just a lot of times they'll have ideas on how to improve things. And I think we come up with something they hadn't thought of, and it makes space more flexible for them. And make sure everything is going to stand the test of time in terms of durability. That's something that we always pay attention to, is just in those environments. It has to be rock solid, just like your product. You have to have people who stand behind it. So
yeah, and actually building on that, because I think it's process-based, right? Which is function doesn't always mean that it can't be creative. And I think it's really beautiful because a lot of times we'll come into a meeting and the client will have an idea of what they want to happen. Like Tiffany was saying, like we want a makerspace and we want to reduce our magazine collection. And we'll say, well, actually, if you put it over here, you get 3 rooms in a row that you can open up together. And then all of a sudden you have a meeting room that can hold 150 people when you were just looking for 30. So I think there's a level of creativity that goes with the functionality of getting the spaces right, that I I really think, circling back to some of the questions that came up earlier, I think that's where we get our most pleasure out of, sort of the satisfaction. And I know it's where our clients get the most satisfaction of too, because you start to see that the idea is there's so much potential in these buildings, and a lot of times you just have to kind of strip a lot of it. A lot of our plans is getting rid of crap, getting rid of all these rooms that were designed kind of poorly in the beginning. And all of a sudden you start to see the basics of the building that are actually really good. And then putting it back together in a way that lets you take advantage of that, I think it's one thing that we do really well. But I think in terms of design, it's something that, having worked on a lot of different building types, if you can keep that cleanliness of the plan or cleanliness of the solution intact throughout the design, you actually get to take advantage of the versatility of the space, because it won't be so specific that you can't use it for other things, if that makes sense. And I think that goes for all design. That goes for cars, that goes for furniture, it goes for buildings. I think that's something that people could take advantage of for sure.
Well, thank you guys for your time today. This was really great.
This is fun to talk about. We don't get to talk like this very often.
Yeah. All right, have a good day.
All right.
You guys.